Tell me, Germany, are we nuts? Hey guys, what's up? It's Kelly again. Welcome back to my apartment and welcome to my channel. For today's video, I decided to do a part 2, or should I say part 2, video to my first German apartment video. And if you haven't watched that video yet, click pause, go find that video and watch it because I'm going to reference it a couple times throughout this one and I don't want you to get lost in what I'm talking about. People wanted to see more of my apartment and less of my face. So I'm working on that too. All right, enough about all that. Let's get on to the apartment tour. And the first thing I want to point out during this apartment tour is the front door. The front door to this apartment automatically locks behind me, and I'm not used to that because everywhere I've lived in the States, I've had to manually lock the door behind me, which makes it impossible to accidentally lock myself out. So because of that, I keep my keys here just to make sure that I never forget them since I'm not used to it, especially when I do something simple like just taking out the trash. This apartment also opens up right into a hallway, which I think is quite common in Germany, whereas in the US, I would say it's more common for the front door to open up right into a living room. We're gonna go into the kitchen next, but before we even go in it, I wanna point out the kitchen door. I have never seen one of these before moving to Germany. All of the places I lived in the States had a much more open floor plan, so the kitchen opened right up into the dining room or the living room or maybe both. And if it did have some sort of separation, there was an apartment I lived in college where it was separated from the rest of the apartment, it still had these very wide entryways that were wider than your average door frame. So this was very different to me that you can just close the door to the kitchen if you want. So this is my kitchen, and it is quite a bit smaller than what I'm used to having in the States. But I will say that I've never lived in like a major city in the States, and so I think those apartments have a lot smaller kitchens as well. I thought that I wouldn't like this kitchen because of how small it is. I thought that it would prohibit me from being able to do a lot of the cooking that I wanted to do, but I found that it's actually a perfect amount of space and I'm able to do everything I want. I'm also just cooking for my boyfriend and I, and so I don't have like a huge family that I'm cooking for, and maybe that would change my opinion. In my first video, I talked about how Germans move their kitchens from apartment to apartment. And while I will say that not all Germans move their kitchens, enough Germans do it that I think it makes it culturally significant to Germany. My boyfriend did in fact move this kitchen into this apartment from his last apartment, which meant that he had to kind of do some modifications because his last kitchen was shaped differently than this one. For an example of the modification, I'll show you this. This space here is because this kitchen was not built for this apartment and this size area. This tile or splash guard is behind the refrigerator, which doesn't really make sense, but again, it's because this kitchen was not built for this apartment. I would actually say that the whole moving the kitchen thing was the biggest culture shock that I had when I moved to Germany and started looking for my own place. I looked at a bunch of apartments in both Rhineland-Pfalz and Hessen, and when I was walking through them with the landlord or the realtor or whoever, I was always just so amazed to find this big empty room with no cabinets, no appliances, no counters, and that was the kitchen. In the US, I have never seen an apartment without a kitchen. It's part of the apartment. This is the only cabinet that we keep food in. All the other cabinets, and by all the other cabinets, I mean this like half cabinet and the 2 cabinets over here, they have dishes in them. We have this cabinet here that allows us to be able to store more food. So we keep produce on the top shelf, and inside we have mostly canned goods. A lot of places in the States, though not all of them, will have a pantry, which is a sort of closet dedicated to storing food or whatever other kitchen items you may have that doesn't fit in the cabinets. But like I said in my first video, there isn't a lot of built-in storage in the apartments I've seen in Germany, so instead you use furniture. Also in this cabinet we keep our grocery bags, and it is ridiculous how many of these bags we have accumulated. If you watch my German grocery store video, then you'll hear me talk about how German grocery stores don't really use plastic bags. They want you to bring your own bags, or they make you pay for paper bags at the cashier. I can't be the only one. Like, we're not crazy, right? Is anyone else having an entire storage area dedicated to these bags? Like, tell me, Germany, are we nuts? Ugh. but I don't, so. One thing in my apartment that we do use those bags for, aside from groceries, is we have what my boyfriend calls a fund bag. And it's basically where we put all of our recyclable bottles. In the US, I've always had or seen people have like a little, maybe it's a trash can or a sort of bin or like an actual like sanctioned recycling bin that you throw all your recyclables into. I'm sure that Germans have those bins too, but we in this apartment use a bag. And when I say fund bag, it's filled with what are called fund bottles. And I show a little bit about this in my German grocery store video, but basically a fund bottle means that you put a deposit onto the bottle when you purchase the product, and then you can take the bottle back to the grocery store. I think every grocery store has a bottle return, and you put it into the machine and it gives you your deposit back to be able to use in that grocery store towards your groceries, or you can, I think, just get the money back in cash. And you know it's a fund bottle if it has this specific symbol on there. And the machine actually reads that symbol to make sure that you're feeding it fund bottles. And my boyfriend really hates it when I put non-fund bottles into the fund bottle bag. We're gonna head to the bathroom next. This is our bathroom. It's a little narrow and tight, so sorry I can't really get the best framing, but I wanted to point out that after I'm done with showering in this bathroom, I go over to the windows and I kip them open or I tilt them back so that fresh air can get into the bathroom, and moisture and the humidity that accumulated in the bathroom from my shower is able to escape. And that prevents the growth of mold. Whereas in the US, of the 7 houses I lived in and the 5 different apartments, only 2 of those had bathrooms with windows. So opening the window to get the moisture out wasn't exactly an option for me. Instead, I would turn on the fan or the ventilation system to get that moisture out, which isn't an option for me here because there is no fan or ventilation system. All I have are those windows. In my last video, I talk about how a lot of German apartments will have the washer and dryer in the bathroom. I've also seen them in the kitchen, but when they're in the kitchen, I usually see it being just the washer, or I've seen washer and dryer combo machines, which is really new to me. I've never seen a machine that's like 2-in-1 like that. I'm actually really curious about them. So if you own a machine like that, or maybe you've used one, if you can put in the comments what you think about it. Is it more efficient? Are you able to get your laundry done like as quickly if you have a couple loads? I'm just really curious about it because it's very different to me. Another thing I wanted to point out about this bathroom is this window right here. I had never seen a window like that and I didn't really understand its purpose. It is to help get natural light into the hallway. The hallway doesn't have any windows of its own, so the light that comes into the bathroom can then be transmitted into the hallway through that window even when the door is closed. Which I guess is a nice feature, but I don't know if maybe I just don't put a lot of priority on having natural light in the hallway, so it's still kind of odd to me. Actually, if you go out into our hallway, you'll notice above our front door there is another window very similar to that. And our front door leads out to the apartment buildings like community stairwell, and it's really well lit with these huge windows that are out there. And so that light is able to transmit through that window into our hallway. Before we leave the bathroom, I wanted to point out one last thing, and that is the hot water heater. So this is an electric hot water heater. In the States, we have like these giant tanks that are just like full of gallons and gallons and gallons of water that are kept hot inside of that tank. And when you call for hot water at your faucet, hot water will flow from the tank into your faucet. I never really thought too much about our style of hot water heaters until I moved out of my parents' house and was out on my own, paying for my own electricity bills, and started to wonder how much electricity I am just wasting on this hot water heater that is clearly losing heat because it's not really well insulated, and it is heating up water that I might not even use at all that day. Whereas with this, it's quite a bit different. Whenever I call for hot water at a faucet in this apartment, water will flow through this machine, heat up somewhat instantly, and come right to my faucet. I'm not losing a lot of energy, and I'm only heating up water that I'm actually using. Another great thing about this hot water heater is that you never run out of hot water. I very clearly remember growing up in a house of 4, and we were all getting ready to go to school or to work, and we're all taking showers, and inevitably the person taking the last shower might have the hot water cut off like halfway through the shower because the tank went dry of hot water and it can't heat up the water fast enough to keep up with our usage. Whereas here, because it only heats up it as you use it, you never run out of hot water. Okay, let's move on to the bedroom. There are a couple things I want to point out in this bedroom, but first I want to talk about this electrical outlet. So a commenter on my last video pointed out this outlet to me and said that it is put here up off the floor so you can easily plug in your vacuum cleaner. And I laughed when I read that comment because that's exactly what I use this outlet for, and it never even occurred to me that it was all part of the plan, that it was put there for that specific purpose. And I'm trying to think of places I lived in the US and if there were any outlets up off the floor like that. And aside from bathrooms and kitchens, I really can't think of any. So it's a tiny difference, but it's a difference. And I'm gonna talk about the bed because it is very different from the beds that I've seen in the States. This is the type of bed we have in our bedroom in this apartment. I'm sure there are all different styles of beds throughout Germany, but this was extremely unique to me because I've never seen a bed styled like this in the US. And also I noticed that a lot of the hotels in Germany have very similarly structured beds, and so to me it was somewhat culturally significant. If you notice, we have 2 different blankets, one for me and one for my boyfriend. Well, I actually have 2 because I get really cold at night. So he has his own blanket, and I put on 2 different colored fitted sheets so you could really tell the difference that there are 2 different mattresses here. The benefit to this is that if I like a softer mattress, I can have a softer mattress, and if he likes a firmer mattress, he can have a firmer mattress, and each of us can kind of accommodate our sleeping area the way we want it to be. And the mattresses themselves, not only is it different that there's 2 of them laying right next to each other on the same bed frame. It's not 2 different beds, it's one bed frame. They also are way more flexible and pliable than the mattresses I'm used to in the US. In the US, we have a lot more sturdy mattresses, and I think that a lot of Americans looking at this might think that this is very uncomfortable because if you were to put 2 American style mattresses next to each other, it would be uncomfortable. You have like really hard corners or edges that you would just be driven nuts by, I'm sure. But these mattresses are really soft. They don't have those there's a seam here, but it's not like the really hard edge to a mattress like we're used to in the States. Another thing I want to point out is that these mattresses are sitting on wooden slates, whereas in the US, we're used to putting our mattresses on box springs. There are also these metal brackets on this bed that allow you to be able to raise or lower the foot of the bed and the head of the bed, and we each have our own little wooden slate thing, so I can raise my side without impacting my boyfriend and vice versa. Another thing is how short this bed is. So this bed comes up to like mid-calf for me, whereas in the US, I would say that most beds come up to mid-thigh. My bed comes up to like my waist. The only person I've ever seen with a bed this low is actually a friend of mine who is half German and grew up in Germany, so I don't really think it's the greatest comparison. But I would say that most American beds are way higher up off the ground compared to this bed and many of the German beds I've seen. The last thing I want to point out about the bed are the pillows. These are square pillows, and I see these at a lot of the stores here in Germany. In the US, I've only seen square pillows for decorative purposes. Usually the pillows that we use to put our head on to go to sleep are rectangular shaped. Another thing I wanted to talk about in the bedroom are the style of lamps. This lamp has the switch on the cord, so I can easily turn it on and off. Whereas I think in the US, it's still more popular to have the on and off switch on the neck of the lamp itself. There are a lot of lamps that are exactly like this in the States, but I wouldn't say that they're more common, whereas here I would say that this style is more common. All right, I think that's all for the bedroom, so let's head to the living room. Something I want to point out in the living room are these light fixtures. My boyfriend installed that light fixture himself, and actually he installed all the light fixtures in this apartment when he moved in, just like he installed the kitchen. And I think that same with the kitchen, a lot of Germans look at their light fixtures as being part of their property, part of their furniture. They choose the ones they like, and of course they're gonna move them with them apartment to apartment. Whereas in the US, to me at least, light fixtures, the kitchen, all of that is part of the apartment. I look at that stuff as the same way I look at like the toilet, the sink, the bathtub. So when you look at apartments in the US, all of that stuff is already there. In fact, a lot of apartments in the US even come with a washer and a dryer. Another thing I learned when I came to Germany is that they list their apartments as like 2-room apartment, 3-room apartment, and to me that meant 2-bedroom apartment, 3-bedroom apartment. When I started going and looking at these apartments, I quickly learned that included in that number of rooms is the living room, and that's very different to me. In the States, it's always assumed you're getting a living room in your apartment, and you don't have to list it separately. Unless it's a studio apartment, which is like a little bit of a different case, it's always assumed you're getting a living room in addition to however many bedrooms is in the apartment. So we would say a 2-bedroom apartment to mean there are 2 actual bedrooms plus a living room, or a 3-bedroom apartment, there's 3 bedrooms plus a living room. Also about this living room is that just like the kitchen, there is a door. And again, that is different to me. I've never seen a living room with a door because it's usually a more open floor plan. And if there is some sort of entryway, just like the kitchen, it's usually just an open entryway and maybe even wider than like a normal door frame would be. So that's all I really have to say about this living room, but there are a couple more things I want to say about the differences I've noticed between German apartments and US apartments. One of those things is the security deposit. In the US, I'm used to paying 1 month's rent security deposit. Here in Germany, I've noticed that the security deposits are quite a bit higher. In my last apartment, I had to pay 2.5 months worth of rent for my security deposit, which is way more money than I'm used to putting down. And I don't know if that's because I heard that it's a lot harder for landlords to be able to kick out tenants that aren't paying or are causing issues in the apartment, and so that money is set aside to be able to help offset costs with issues with renters. I'm not really sure what the reason is. I just know that it is a lot higher from what I've experienced. And the whole utility thing here is way different than it is in the US, and I could probably spend a lot of time talking about it, but to just put it as simply as I can, in the US, I would pay my electricity bill every month for the exact amount of electricity that I used for that last month. Here in Germany, it's very different. Every month, I pay a set amount that is sort of an advance towards the electricity bill that I actually get at the end of the year when they do a final meter reading. And so if I put down, let's say 50 euros every single month, which is 600 euro for a year, and then that final meter reading is done and maybe I use more electricity than 600 euros worth, I used 800 euros worth of electricity, then I would owe the electric company 200 more euros. I'm not the biggest fan of this system because I really would rather just pay exactly what I owe every single month, but that's how they do it here. I'm sure there's a reason that I'm just not knowledgeable about, so if you know why that is done this way, or if you have an opinion on why it would be better than how we do it in the US, put it in the comments. I'd be super interested to read your perspective. All right, guys, that's all I have for you today. I hope you liked this video. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, guys, please go ahead and click that subscribe button. I'll be posting videos every single week, and I hope to see you next time. Bye! Hey guys, I have a really exciting announcement. I am finally on Patreon. Patreon is a really cool concept, and it basically allows you guys to directly support me so I can keep creating interesting content you want to watch. And by becoming one of my patrons, you'll get access to exclusive content like bloopers, behind the scenes footage, deleted scenes, and even personal Q&A, where I'll answer questions like, why did I move to Germany? What is my job? Where did this one-eyed chihuahua come from? I linked my Patreon account below so you can check it out for more information and become one of my patrons.